Thank you,
5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to pick up pretty much where you left off. Secretary Geithner, I think, pardon me? I think you've answered, that you played no role in the decision to not disclose the full payment, the 100% payment to the counterparties, that you were not part of what some of us have called a cover-up. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me follow up then. If after November 24th you were not involved in any activity, then one more, just to be clear, did you ever become involved with the Federal Reserve's disclosure decision with respect to AIG counterparty claims after your nomination as Treasury Secretary? In other words, have you ever participated or questioned or stayed involved with that?
No, I did not.
Well, from what we were given by the Fed, could we put up slide 1? This email from you says to William Dudley, your replacement, on March of 2009, and it, where's the line to read here? Okay, yeah, it's easier to read on the screen. Where are you on the AIG counterparty disclosure issue? Long after you left, you made this email. What was it about, and what was the answer?
Well, Congressman, as you know, this question of disclosure was the subject of huge amount of controversy. And most people...
You think?
Yeah. That's what my son says, and I agree with you. And I think most people feel as you do. They said, why shouldn't it be disclosed? Why shouldn't it be disclosed? And as you know, in March, which I think, if I'm not mistaken,
yeah,
that was
March
the
15th.
Time of this email, it had been subject of testimony by the Vice Chairman of the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve was facing a huge amount of pressure and attention over whether to disclose. So I assume I was doing what you might expect in that context in asking them, where were they? Were they going to change their position? Okay.
Well, then following up on your continued involvement and looking at them, where are you on this? Do you believe that there should be full disclosure, as the President has said, that these kinds of instruments should be public, that essentially they be like any other instrument, the details of which should be available broadly?
Congressman, I believe deeply that trust and confidence in the financial system requires disclosure and transparency. I believe that trust and confidence in the government requires that our actions be subject to full exposure and review by careful independent analysis. And I have been very, very supportive since I came into office and before to making sure we were bringing an unprecedented level of disclosure to the transparency around the actions of the government. I'll just give you a few examples. When I came into office, we put the financial terms of all of the transactions we undertook under the TARP in the public domain for everyone to see. One of the reasons our financial strategy has been successful in bringing a measure of stability back to our system is we compelled the largest institutions in the country to subject their balance sheets to a level of disclosure.
Secretary, and I appreciate what you've been doing as Treasury Secretary, but I have in front of me from the Fed, marked confidential, the details of who benefited, who got these benefits, and currently it's locked up till 2018 by an order that wasn't negotiated and final until May of this year, or May of last year, long after you were obviously able to be involved, that locks up the public knowing. And these are assets the American people have paid for in full, right? Do you believe that we should know about these?
Congressman, that's an issue that I think you need to direct to the New York Fed and to the SEC.
Okay. Well,
you asked me a question that I didn't quite get a chance to answer before, which is, you said, what was my view, in effect,
yes,
of what the Fed ultimately did? It's very important to recognize that the Fed did in March of 2009 fully release information on the counterparties and the details of that transaction. And based on what I know, I thought the decision was appropriate then. Now, I know a lot of people have said,
okay,
should that have come sooner? I think reasonable people could come to that judgment, but I did not stand in their shoes at the time.
Now, as a member and the head of the New York Fed, and also, I guess, broadly a member of the board generally until you were sworn in.
Gentleman's time's expired.
I'll just finish up this one question, Mr. Chairman, very quickly. You were aware that Chairman Bernanke, in fact, had in front of him from the staff a report that said AIG should be allowed to go bankrupt, which was then held back on September 16th, based on his decision on September 15th, not to disclose this for a broad vote of the board, weren't you?
I'm not aware of the email you referred to, but I'm aware of the following, and I want to emphasize
The witness
this.
may answer the question, and then we're going to move on to the next questioner.
Thank you. Every decision we made in the days before September 16th and afterwards were enormously controversial decisions.
No, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman's time's
I
expired.
understand.
Chair recognizes Mr. Kanjorski.
I would ask unanimous consent to just get an answer to the question. It'll be
Well,
very quick.
each member has 5 minutes. Without objection, the witness can answer the question. We're
Right.
going to move on to
The
Mr.
only question we
Kanjorski.
want is, were you aware of that? And if you weren't, do you think you should have been aware of that for a vote on September 16th? That's all.
Well, I was aware that there was enormous concern both in the New York Fed and at the Federal Reserve Board about the choices we were confronted. As I said, there is nothing more controversial and difficult than I think anything we face in this context. And I think it should be reassuring and no surprise that those actions, and the record will show that those actions were the subject of enormous debate. And they were the subject of debate before the 16th and afterwards. And every time we faced the possibility of having to do more, we all stepped back and said, do we really need to do that? Does that make sense? And
Okay.
that is a good thing for the country. You had people willing to debate that and argue it forcefully.